Hi, I'm composer Nicholas Britell, and I'm here with Vanity Fair today to explore my score to HBO's Succession. Now, the word score would really imply the whole entity of all the music that I've written as underscore for the show. Now, when I'm talking about themes in the show, I'm basically referring to a musical idea that recurs and that may evolve over the course of the show. There can be many different themes and many variations on those themes, all within this idea of the entirety of the score. The score for Succession has a similar duality that I think the show has, which is this combination of elements of absurdity and also a deep gravitas under the surface, because the show itself is dealing with very serious issues of concentrations of power and wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer people, focused in the media industry. But at the same time, there's a human side of the story which focuses on some of the day-to-day absurdities and pettiness and strife among the cast of characters. And when I was first thinking about the type of music for the show, I was imagining for myself, what is the music that the Roy family might imagine for themselves? And then at the same time, I remember early on seeing some of the dailies where Jeremy was rapping Beastie Boys to himself. So there was this thought of, well, is there a kind of dark, courtly classical music that might feel like it's related to them, that they would think of for themselves? What if we also mix that with some hip-hop beats and see what that sounds like? And right away it felt like there was something working with this strange combination of sounds. This sort of immediate dissonance right from the top of the piece where, you hear this sort of C minor chord, but there's actually a B natural in it, which gives you this immediate sense that something is maybe potentially off. And the melody line on top, this, if you break it down right away from the top, there's these sort of accented dissonances which aren't in the scale. So, this, if you go on an A flat major chord, that note isn't part of the scale. So I'm constantly winding in these notes that aren't part of the scale just to kind of like jolt the music in a different direction. So So you see how things are always kind of off kilter with themselves, like the family in the show. On top of that, underneath it, if you strip out what's happening on the melody, there are these chords. This is a very sort of old school classical set of harmonies which many composers would use these kinds of chords often to signify perhaps a culmination of a minor key piece of classical music. It's 1, 6, 2, half diminished in a first inversion, and then on the 5. So you get this feeling of a late 1700s dark classical universe, and then there's a sort of scope and epic nature to the way that the score then evolves, where you have these large chords played on a string orchestra. The main theme, in its essence, forms the basis for many of the variations that I explore, certainly in season 1. So we have this theme. kind of motif where these chords can then evolve into something like this. Point in season 2, the music actually takes a left turn and goes into a new melody and harmony. This is a new set of ideas for season 2. So you can see how not only is there a kind of variation that happens with the chords and the basic idea from season 1, but in season 2, one of the fun things to explore was where do we go with these characters as they themselves are evolving, as the story is developing in a different place. The conversation that I had at the end of season 1 into season 2 with Jesse Armstrong, our show's creator, had this idea of what if the main ideas were almost like the first movement of a symphony, and what if in season 2 was kind of like a second movement of a symphony. So that's actually where I came up with some of those ideas, as taking them into a slightly different emotional place, and still, for sure, at times going back to the ideas from season 1. And what's actually interesting in the show is that there are times where a theme will start seeming like it may be related to one character, but it actually becomes related to many of the characters. And I think that some of those are actually almost like unexpected on our part. There's times where a certain piece of music just links up in a way with a storyline, and it's almost like the show is directing us in a certain place where it's almost telling us that there are these other dynamics at work. So I'm always excited to see the new episodes, because I try to stay as open as possible to following where I feel the show is taking me and how I might then evolve the music along with it. There's a lot of different places that different themes might occur. There's different variations on them. Different instruments may play them. So for example, the variation in the culmination theme that I was talking about, that's a change in the form and the rhythm. So there's you call it kind of like an ostinato, where it's this sort of, but the chords, in this case, it's a variation because they're the same chords, but the form of the piece is just different now. And then there's sort of a filigree, kind of more virtuosic element. And that can be played with piano, it could be played with strings, it could be played with many different instruments. There's always something lurking between the surface, hopefully, with a lot of these themes. At the beginning of one of the episodes, where we see Logan walking in Central Park, there's a dark melancholy, I think, in that, but there's also, at least to me, I think I'm sort of implying a sort of coiled power maybe inside of it. These sort of... In particular with Logan's character, where none of us really know the full depths of what he's thinking of. There's quite a few different variations where I also explore different kinds of classical forms too. There's things, all of those were in essentially like 4/4 time. There's things I do in almost like a minuet, kind of a dark minuet. There's a theme that you hear at times, this kind of idea. And again, I think there's a sort of dark, courtly nature to that, but it's also kind of dance-like in a sense, which provides different tone in different places. That piece of music actually may occur around corporate intrigue, when corporate strategy is being discussed. We're always doing musical experiments, and I'm always excited to try different ways of taking us out of these episodes and through the end credits. So in almost all cases, the end credits is its own variation and idea. One of the themes that is very featured at that moment is this theme. Talking about earlier, there's a scope and a dark grandeur at times to the music, but I often like playing things in counterpoint where you've had this large, emotional experience, and yet at the end of the episode, the music actually sort of retreats and goes into a quieter, more melancholy place. There's something interesting about this feeling of like, is there this inherent, subtle sadness that's underlying all of what's happening in this show? So we've just explored a few of the main themes of Succession, seasons 1 and 2, and how some of these themes evolve over the course of the 20 episodes. I am curious myself as to where season 3 takes us, and I hope you've enjoyed this musical exploration of the music in Succession.